the increasing life expectancy means that more of us will need help, because as you get older and as you live for longer, you're more likely to need somebody to help you. Obviously not if you actively age, and we've got good systems in place in the Isle of Man to encourage people to make sure that they look after themselves as much as they can, to minimise the risk to themselves and the people who care for them around them. But yes, it is an issue that the amount of money that will be spent in our society on caring for older people will inevitably rise because of the average life expectancy increasing. In your question, you assumed you'd contribute. Other people would start from the premise that, is it my responsibility or is it the state's responsibility? If it is you, who did you mean by you? Did you mean you individually as a son, or did you mean you and your wife, or you and your brother and sisters, or whatever your family situation is? These are all questions that about which we need to come to a consensus. So where we are in the process is that Tynwald unanimously agreed in July that we would have a public awareness campaign and also a consensus building campaign about what we should do for this issue. There are 5 or 6 alternative models which we laid out in a report which we published in July, some of them involving the state paying for everything, others involving the household and families paying for most, a lot more at least, and in between we had variants on them. We'll work 1 or 2 of those up more fully so that we can go back to Tynwald in the early summer next year, and these focus groups are to help as part of that discussion, and I really hope people around the island will come out to help us understand their concerns and make sure that they understand the reality of the situation now and the options that we have in front of them at the moment.
And as you say, groups coming up first on the 16th of October in Ramsey, and then later on in Owerbakehouse, Douglas, Castletown, and also in the west over in Peel on the 25th. No matter what we do, though, we're always coming back to the same issue, and the one you hear time and again now is the bottom line is, right, if you're at whatever age you are and younger in life, you save, and we're always being encouraged to save. You get into older age and you need your savings, and you get this constant, you hear this argument, people finding, right, my mum and dad saved a lot, they were always very good, they saved their money, and when they got into old age, they're now being bled dry because they're having to pay for all the care they need. And next door is a person who's never made any effort to save, and the state's paying for all of it.
Yeah, and we're a caring society, so I'm absolutely sure the Manx public will decide eventually there's got to be a safety net, but that point of view that you expressed then is one that we need to balance differently so that more people perceive it as fairly. It's been very difficult for politicians here in the Isle of Man to bite the bullet to face these changes. In the UK, it's brought down a couple of governments when they talked about caps and thresholds. Mrs May put it into a manifesto, then withdrew it from a manifesto. It's definitely in this government's programme for government that we are going to do things probably ahead of the UK in terms of the funding of residential nursing care. And we have a system, a modified system based on that cap and threshold approach, which would deal with that issue probably more fairly. We want to break down the costs of care into the elements that are directly related to care and perhaps what can be seen as the accommodation costs. We've already had some focus groups with younger people. We had some more, earlier, I think last week we had one. And all these focus groups are telling us that people want us actually to be bold in terms of our solution. So one idea that came up was that we could perhaps have standard care when you needed care, but in terms of the wraparound, the standard of the accommodation and the standard of the package around it might be different for different people. There's always been an element of that, but that's something that people wanted us to explore. So what these focus groups are about, which I hope younger people, middle-aged people, people who are older will participate in, are all about is helping us understand, is there a consensus there in Manx society to make one or other of the bold changes that we want to make next year so that we can begin to address the multi-generational issue that you've just raised and outlined very succinctly, Howard.